Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony that you're about to give in this cause will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Come this way. Good morning again. If you would please introduce yourself and spell your name for us.
Yes, ma'am. The name is Clay Hobelmann. First name is Clay, C-L-E-Y. Last name is Hobelmann, H-O-B-E-L-M-A-N-N.
Good morning.
Good morning, ma'am.
Tell the jury, where do you work?
I work with the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you worked for the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office?
I have worked there over 14 years now.
What's your title now?
I am a detective with the Sheriff's Office.
Were you a detective on August 29th to August 30th of 2022?
Yes, ma'am, I was.
At that time, did you have a specific unit or department that you were working with?
More broadly, I'm assigned to Criminal Investigations Division, and then more narrowly, I'm in the homicide section.
Help us understand, as a detective in the homicide section, what are your duties?
We investigate a number of different cases, exclusively homicides, as the name would suggest, but we also investigate cases that include any natural deaths through suicides, overdoses, and then we have a couple other assignments that we will assist on if there are kidnappings. So we do a broad range of things, and then we will also cover for other criminal investigation units as well to assist in their investigations.
During a homicide investigation, is there just one detective that's decided to be involved in the investigation, or are there multiple?
Generally, we have no less than three for three specific and designated roles, and then we may also have other detectives assisting those primary three roles.
Explain to the jury so that they understand what is the purpose of having at least the three detectives involved in each homicide investigation.
Those three roles are going to include your lead detective, who is responsible for a majority of the activities or requirements for the investigation. You have your assist that is working in tandem with your lead investigator, and then you also have a scene detective or scene investigator whose responsibility is managing the scene and understanding all the facts of the scene, and then working with the lead investigator throughout the remainder of the investigation.
When you are a detective working with the homicide department, do you typically perform one of these duties of lead, assist, or scene at every single homicide that you go out to, or does it differ?
Yes, in every one of those cases, at least those three roles are assigned. As individual detectives, we may be assigned one role for one investigation, and we may shift to a different role for another investigation. But at least those three roles are always covered in every assignment or in every investigation that we go out to.
So since you became a detective in the homicide department of Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, have you had occasions where you were the lead detective?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you also had occasions where you were the scene detective?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, in this case involving the defendant Jermaine Bass, on August 29th, August 30th of 2022, tell the jury what your role was in this homicide investigation.
I was assigned as the scene detective.
When you say scene detective, I understand you just explained that it was walking around documenting the scene. Let's get into the more detailed part of what exactly you do. So let's say you're called out to a scene, you're given the role of scene detective. Walk the jury through what you generally do when you are assigned to be the scene detective for a homicide.
So the scene detective is responsible for, first and foremost, the scene, the location where the incident is happening, as well as any secondary, tertiary locations that might be included. It might include vehicles. It's essentially everything that is going to be a physical portion of the investigation. Generally speaking, our scene detective is responsible for. That could include writing all of the search warrants for those physical locations or addresses. That includes the searching of those locations, and that includes the documentation, both collection of evidence as well as documenting through photographs, taking photographs, overseeing that the proper photographs are being taken.
So I understand that at a homicide investigation, there's at least three positions that are assigned. But is it safe to say that homicide detectives are generally not the first people to respond to, for instance, shots called that call that comes in to 911?
Yes, that's fair. Generally, deputies are going to be our first responding units coming to that call to kind of assess what is happening there and make a determination as to the additional investigation that is required. And at that time, then phone calls are being made to request either homicide come out or special victims units come out, whatever detectives might be an assist to that investigation.
Once homicide detectives are sent to an investigation scene, are they first apprised by the deputies of what they saw when they first arrived?
Yes, usually to some extent there is some foreknowledge of what is happening at the scene or what has happened or has been observed. It may come through deputies, it may come through supervisors, but generally speaking, when we do arrive at a scene, we have some idea of what has been done at the scene or what we may be facing at the scene.
Based on the information that you're given, when you first arrived to a homicide scene, does that information and what you're told affect some of the decisions or the direction that you're documenting or your investigation of the scene? Does that information affect the decisions you make at the scene?
Yes, I would say it does. I think that as one of the responsibilities of the scene detective, you are not only doing that documentation and trying to get an overall objective understanding of what may have happened there, but you're obviously going to be contrasting the information that you're getting. First, your initial information of what is coming through your dispatch call. Secondly, your information that you're getting once you arrive to the scene and talk to your deputies or you're talking to some of those supervisors. And then throughout the investigation, our scene detectives stay in contact with the lead investigator who's out doing their interviews, who's out collecting video surveillance, and is getting a working knowledge of what's happening outside of that house. And they are in constant communication with the scene detective to try to determine what things might be of special importance or value within that residence.
When you became involved in the investigation of this case, were you given information by other deputies when you arrived about what happened?
Yes, ma'am.
What were you told?
We were told that there...
Hearsay.
Its effect on the listener, Judge. He explained that he is given information at the scene, and from that information he makes certain decisions at the scene of what document and what not to document.
Well, I have no idea what was said at this time, so sustained.
Can we approach the bench to confer, Judge?
Sure.
After you received information about what the other deputies saw or heard when they first arrived, what did you decide to do next?
For this investigation, I collected information from the deputies that were there at the scene and used some of that information as well as some observations we were able to make just from the outside of the residence to complete a search warrant for that residence.
Explain to the jury what a search warrant is and what it means.
A search warrant is a document that we use in an event that we may be recovering evidence from that location or from a person or from a general area or even potentially from a cell phone in which we think that might be evidence of the case and of which somebody may not be willing or voluntarily wanting us to enter into that location or enter into that cell phone device. For a search warrant, we need probable cause, which is essentially a probability that there is evidence in that location, be it a phone, be it a residence, that we would need for our investigation. We use a combination of our own observations as well as observations of other fellow deputies or detectives to put information into that document explaining why we feel that we need to go into that residence and collect evidence or potentially collect photographs, anything that may be of value for our investigation. That has to be signed by the state attorney's, or excuse me, approved by the state attorney's office and signed by a judge saying, yes, you're allowed to go into that location to do whatever you need to do for your investigation.
So in this investigation, you obtained a search warrant. Did you search the entirety of the townhome involved in this case?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
So after that, did you begin documenting the scene?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, as a part of documenting the scene, are you, as the scene investigator or detective, are you responsible for actually taking the photos and actually placing the evidence markers, or do you work with someone else to help you do that?
We work with our crime scene investigations department or our CSI department.
Now, in this case, did that include crime scene investigator Shannon Bader?
Yes, ma'am.
When you first walked into the townhome, what did you see of relevance when you first walked in? And I'm putting on the Elmo 22A.
Within entering the residence, the door opens inward and we come into a foyer area that has a kitchen just off to the side of it. Beyond that, there's a dining room area, and then a little further beyond that, there's a TV room area or an entertainment room, I guess, or living room space. On that location or at that location is a black couch, and we noted what we believed was going to be some blood on the edge of that couch or the side cushion of that couch, as well as a small metal item that looks like a clasp or a toothed clasp that, just based on my familiarity with them, looks like the kind of clasp that's used to secure an elastic bandage or an ace bandage, with those little teeth that kind of bite into the fabric.
Now, once you go up the stairs, what's the first bedroom that you see up on top of the stairs?
The first bedroom you come to when you are ascending the stairs is going to be what we determined was the children's bedroom.
Now, states 22R and placing on the Elmo. Are we looking at the top bunk in 22R, or are we looking at the bottom bunk?
This would be the top bunk, ma'am.
Okay, we're looking at the back of the photo. You can see a sticker that is on the wall, right about the middle that I'm pointing to right here. It's a yellow sticker labeled Damage A. We see another sticker labeled Damage B. And we see another green sticker, which we see labeled red substance. I want to specifically talk about Damage A and Damage B. What wall are we looking at that we're pointing to where Damage A sticker is labeled on? What is on the other side of this wall?
On the other side of that wall is going to be a bathroom.
Now, I'm placing... One moment, I'm sorry. We're trying not to get the photos out of order, but I can't make any promises. I'm placing 22Z on the Elmo. Tell us to the right over here, what room is this? You can see like a small, maybe what, a quarter of an inch opening, and it looks like it's going into a room. Explain to the jury what room that this is going in.
So the darkened margin on the right side of your photograph as you're looking at it is going to be the darkened space, just because of the lighting at that time, of the children's bedroom or of the kids' bedroom, where that same bunk bed we just saw in the previous photograph would be located.
Once we're inside the bathroom that's depicted in 22Z, I'm placing 22AA on the Elmo. Is this a closer up image of that exact same wall? And am I correct in pointing to the yellow marker on A1 to the right? It's labeled Damage A1. Is that the same wall, the back side of the wall, belonging to Damage A?
Yes, ma'am.
And for reference, I'm putting back on the Elmo 22R. The Elmo is a little fuzzy, if you can give it just a minute. So the damage we're seeing right here in 22A. Is it your testimony from what you saw? It goes through the wall and exits in damage A1 that we're seeing on 22AA on the right over here.
Yes, ma'am, that is our belief. There is a space in just the normal construction space between those two walls. But yes, it would appear, based on some other continued observations that we make once we get to A2 and A3, that that's going to be one continuous trajectory of a projectile going through the wall.
Now, you explained earlier that you were working with the homicide unit as a detective for quite some time. About how many times at the time of this incident had you been assigned to be a scene detective?
Probably in excess of 25 or 30 times for scene.
Okay, and during those 25 to 30 times, or other times that you've been called out to a homicide investigation, have those before included gunshots going through drywall?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you had an occasion in these prior scenes that you visited to notice the shape that a gunshot may make when it's going through drywall?
Yes, ma'am.
Describe for us the shape of 22R, where we're looking at damage A.
It would appear, oh, go ahead.
Well, oh, sorry. I was specifically wanting to ask to you, based on your training and your experience, the significance of the shape of the damage A that we see depicted in this photo.
With this photograph, we're seeing a rounded shape as it goes through the wall. When you're seeing the clean edges, generally speaking, that would refer to an entrance or the round coming from this side of the wall, penetrating into this wall. I think you can see slightly from A1, it's a little rougher, and that's because as it starts to come back out of the wall on the opposite side, it's pushing that material in front of it, so it fragments as it's coming out. And you'll see either the wall being pushed out in that direction, or you'll see it's a little bit rougher around those edges as the edges of those are pushed out.
The damage in A1 depicted in 22A that we see on the shower wall. You just mentioned if a projectile was going through the wall, you may see the sides of the shape made in the wall be pushed out slightly. Am I understanding that correctly?
From the exiting side, yes, ma'am.
And let's see, 22 double B, I'm placing on the Elmo. Describe for the record what we're looking at in damage A1, specifically around the shape that you notice.
So this would be what we believe is the corresponding exit from the A damage or the initial A damage. And you'll see where the paint is kind of chipped as that force is pushing that out. And we'll start pushing portions of the wall out with it as the bullet comes out of the wall or would be exiting from the wall. That's a hallmark of what we would typically see with that. It's not impossible to be reversed, but this would generally speak to us as this being an exit of a projectile coming out through the wall.
Now, when you're given information, when you first arrive to a homicide scene about what may have happened or may not have happened, as part of your duties as a scene investigator, are you looking to see whether or not the forensic evidence or the physical evidence at the scene either match up or don't match up to the story that you had been told may or may not have happened?
Yes, that's correct.
Now, we're looking at 22C. It looks like we're in the same shower that we've been talking about, our bathroom that we've been talking about, that is right next to the children's room. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Is this shower curtain also depicted in, or part of the shower that's in 22Z that we've been using for reference? If you were to walk in to the left, would you immediately see what we're looking at in 22C, the shower?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Now, tell us what you notice about damage A2.
It's-
Specifically the shape.
It is somewhat rounded, at least for a portion of the side. The upper, as we see in the photograph, the upper and then the right side of that damage or defect does appear to be rounded. And then there are, you can't see it in this photograph specifically, but you can kind of start to see it. There are subsequent holes behind that or tearings of the same plastic shower material behind that. As it would appear, a projectile continues on its path through the shower curtain.
We're looking at, on the Elmo, 22D. For reference, we see the same damage A2 that we were just discussing in the previous photo, but we also see it slightly blurred on the tile, a damage A3 on a yellow sticky label. Now, I'm placing 22E. Tell the jury what is significant to you based on your training and experience about the shape of damage A in the shower.
Damage A3 appears to be the termination of that projectile going through the wall, impacting the tile of the shower, and then embedding itself in the tile or the substrate that is below the tile. And that's what we're seeing kind of centered in that damage there, is the backside of the projectile or bullet.
Just hang tight for one moment. I'm referencing one specific. Now, during your investigations as a scene detective, at some point during certain investigations, does it become important to take measurements?
Yes, ma'am.
Help us understand, in what situations do you decide to take measurements, and what situations do you decide it may not be necessary?
Most all of our collected items are going to have some measurement to them. You'll see many of these stickers that are being photographed have a scale or have a measurement already on the sticker that helps us understand if it's next to something, what the size is that we're dealing with. If it's something that we find of specific importance that we're collecting, we may do additional measurements of it once we get back to crime scene and have a more controlled environment. But generally speaking, several of our areas that are photographed will have some sort of scale to them. It's not necessarily to give you a specific measurement as to the width or the diameter of the bullets, but it is giving you some context as to how big this portion of damage is on the wall.
I want to talk about trajectory rods. Yesterday we were introduced to the idea of trajectory rods. Tell us why, in certain cases, you may use a trajectory rod.
A trajectory rod is just a tool that we're using. We have to have two solid areas that are either impacted or traversed by a bullet for us, or projectile, for us to be able to use a trajectory rod. We have to have a point A and a point B that we can pass that rod through. Generally speaking, when we do have bullet damages, we are getting some rounded areas that it's going through, as we've kind of seen through this evidence. And then the trajectory rod allows us to pass a straight implement through those holes and now look at the directionality of where that rod is pointing. Generally speaking, if we're looking back in the direction of where we believe the bullet came from, we can get some idea of where the gun would have had to have been positioned or pointed and aimed at that direction. And somewhere, if you were to draw out where that rod is pointing, somewhere along that line a gun was pointing in that same direction and firing that bullet, which passed.
Objection, or outside the scope of this witness's expertise.
Overruled.
You can finish.
Somewhere along that line is going to be the passing of the bullet through the same location where the rod is.
Now, I'm placing on the Elmo, let me move these first. I'm placing on the Elmo 22JJ. We see in this photo the bunk beds and a measuring tool. Are we looking at the top bunk here, or are we looking at the bottom bunk here?
This is still the top bunk, ma'am.
How tall is the topmost portion of the top rail of the top bunk?
It's measured at 5 feet with the large red 5, and then 5 inches with the smaller white in the black background 5.
So is it safe to say that I'm understanding the top most tall portion of the top bunk is 5 feet 5 inches?
Yes, ma'am. The very top, tippy top of the rail, so to speak, would be 5 feet and 5 inches from the floor height.
And to orient the jury, we see in the top left a green sticker that's placed on the wall, and on the photo it's to the left of the measuring tool. Do you see where I'm talking about?
Yes,
When
ma'am.
we talk right here?
Yes.
I'm placing on the Elmo, states 22R. Is that the same, and for the record, once I've placed 22R in the Elmo, I'm pointing to the left portion. There's only one green sticker on the wall, and I'm pointing to it right now. Is that the same sticker that I'm pointing to in 22R that is apparent in 22JJ that we see to the left of the measuring marker?
Yes, ma'am. That would be the same sticker.
Okay. Based on your training and experience, the fact that you were at the scene, I'm placing 22RRR on the Elmo. And it's fuzzy. Let's give it just a second. In 22RRR, we see damage A that we've referred to before. Knowing that the topmost portion that I'm pointing to on the left side is 5 feet and 5 inches. Can you confirm, because you were there, damage A is at least 5 feet 5 inches or higher?
Yes, ma'am, that would be accurate.
Now, I see a green pole that is extending in this photo out of damage A. We've talked about trajectory rods before, but help the jury understand. The green pole that is extending out of damage A, is that a trajectory rod?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm placing on the Elmo 22 LLL. This is labeled, damage A1. And just to orient all of us again, there's a lot of A's, A1s, B's. We determined A is in the children's room above the bunk bed, at least 5 feet 5 inches high. Now, where are we for B or for A1?
Now we're on the bathroom side of the wall, so opposite or the adjoining wall from the bedroom. And this is a measurement of that what we believe to be the corresponding damage of A1.
So, based on the measurement that is in the photo, we have a measuring tool placed to the right of damage A1 that we see. What is the measurement or the height of damage A1 in the children's bathroom?
I would put it between 5'5" and 5'6", somewhere right in that area.
Now, before, when we looked at damage 22 RRR with a green trajectory pole poking out, the corresponding same green pole, 22 LLL, is it the same green trajectory pole?
Yes, ma'am, same rod.
Specifically, I want you to explain to the jury the significance of 22 RRR. I want to draw your attention. Well, let's give it a second to focus. Looks like it's... Here we go. The trajectory rod, the green trajectory rod, protruding out of damage A, explain to the jury the significance of the angle that we see portrayed in this photograph.
Given that we're looking at the wall from what we have interpreted as the entry point, we're dealing with a slightly downward angle, and that angle, for the purpose of this photograph, would be from a left to right
I'm
angle.
going to object again to this witness outside his knowledge and expertise.
Overruled.
You can answer it.
Okay. But it was essentially answered. It's a downward angle and slightly left to right as it's seen in this photograph.
So based on the trajectory rod, is the angle traveling at a downward angle or an upward angle at the point in which it enters the wall marked by damage A?
It's traveling at a downward angle.
22 LLL. I'm placing on the Elmo we've looked at before. We've determined the same trajectory rod in damage A is depicted here in damage A1. I want to draw your attention to the angle of the trajectory rod depicted in this photo. I want you to explain the significance of the angle of the trajectory rod depicted in this photo.
It's still traveling at a downward angle.
So the level, so then I want to place on the Elmo 22 MMM. To orient us, we're looking at the shower curtain with the marker damage A. Is that 2 or 1? A2. I see a measuring tool to the left of A2. Tell the jury, and I'll actually zoom in a little more because it's kind of hard to see the defect or the hole of damage A2. What is the height of damage A2 that's depicted in this photo on the shower curtain?
We're looking at just a little below the 5-foot mark.
So let's say
4'11" and 5 foot.
4'11", right
Right.
between 4'11" and 5 foot.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, you testified before that, and we can see Placing back on the elbow. 22JJJ. And giving the elbow a minute. Where we are using for reference the 5 foot 5 inch height of the outermost tallest portion of the bunk bed. Then I'm placing 22RRR, where it shows, and we've determined that damage A is higher than that 5 feet 5 inch measuring marker of our vantage point right here, the pole that I'm pointing to over in the outermost corner. You've previously testified that the trajectory pole shows a downward trajectory in the photo that we're showing here. And we know 22LLL, you explained, was also showing a downward trajectory of the pole. Is the measurement in 22 MMM that I'm placing on the elbow consistent with the trajectory being at a downward angle coming from the wall, damage A1, to the shower curtain, damage A2?
Objection just again, and ask for continuing objection to this witness giving his expert.
All right. The objection's overruled. You have a continuing objection.
Thank you.
This line of questioning.
You can answer.
Yes, it would be consistent with the round still descending or being in a downward trajectory as it is traveling towards what we can pretty easily identify as its terminal point where it's embedded in the wall.
Now we're looking on 22NNN, placing it on the elbow, where we see damage A3. Next to damage A3, we see a measuring tool. Tell the jury, what is the measurement from the floor, the height of damage A3?
It's between 4'10" and 4'11". 4'10" being kind of the bottom margin of that, where the grout is for that tile, and then 4'11" being the top edge of that damage, and we would expect the actual penetration to be somewhere probably in the middle between 4'10" and 4'11".
Comparing the height of damage A2 that we've determined to be about 5'11" and a half or so.
Or 4'11".
4'11", excuse me. I was looking at the number 5. You're correct.
That's okay.
4'11" of damage A2 and a half or so to the height of damage A3 being slightly below that at 4 foot, between 10 and 11. It kind of encompasses the whole inch there. Is that consistent with the trajectory rod that we saw in damage A and A1 to be at a downward angle?
Yes, it's still downward or still descending.
I'm placing on the elbow 22000. The marker on the wall, is that damage A1?
Yes, ma'am, on the right side wall, in the photograph just above the shower towel holder.
On the shower curtain, is that damage A2?
Yes, ma'am.
And we can kind of see, it looks like there's, over here, there's a cabinet on the wall that's sneaking out right behind the cabinet. It looks like we have another yellow marker that goes into the shower tile. Is that damage A3?
Yes, ma'am.
Explain to the jury the purpose of using the trajectory rod from damage A1 in the bathroom wall to A2 in the shower curtain to A3 in the shower tile.
To again show the path of the projectile as it went through the bathroom, or the likely path of the projectile as it's penetrating through the wall, going through the shower curtain, and then embedding in the tile. So this is a fairly accurate representation of what that path would have looked like.
You just used the word the path a few times. What is the path?
The path of the bullet or the projectile as it's going through the wall and then ending up in the other wall.
And what is the path? It's at a what angle?
The path and trajectory is at a downward angle in this instance.
Is this the same pole that we see in 22 RRR depicted right above damage A.
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Now, based on your training and your experience and your evaluation of the trajectory rod used in this investigation, what occurred from damage A to damage A1 to damage A2 and to damage A3?
I think this has been asked and answered, Judge.
Sustained.
I'm placing on the Elmo 22R to reorient us. Are we looking at the top bunk or the bottom bunk?
Top bunk again.
I want to draw your attention to an evidence label entitled Damage B. I'm pointing to it. It's the yellow label that's closest to the bloody mattress. What does that look like to you when you were first there and you first viewed it?
Our belief was that was also a bullet damage or a bullet impact location.
Looking at 22FFF, what are we looking at here? Well, hold on. Let me start out with a larger view of it. And then, what's significant about this damage, specifically when you zoom in?
We believed, again, this is just a zoomed in or a closer up photograph of one of the preceding photographs of the same damage at damage B. We're seeing some blood in that same area as well as some breaking of the wood on that framework. And towards the right, I would say the right edge of that damage, there's a little bit of rounded shape to that damage that we thought might be consistent with a bullet or a projectile striking that area.
Now, was that damage that's depicted in damage B what sometimes law enforcement would call a through and through, meaning that there's an entrance and an exit?
In terms of a medium before making that impact?
Correct. Like, is there a hole on the other side?
So for this area of wood, no, when we moved that rail away and moved the whole bed away from the wall, we did not see a corresponding hole coming through that piece of wood. So to us, it just looked like a fracture or a damage on the front side of the wood.
Looking at 22XX. Is this another view of the damage that you're talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
I can just have a moment. During your investigation, did you have an occasion to inspect both the top mattress and bottom mattress for places that may be of evidentiary value?
Yes, ma'am, we did that.
Tell us about your inspection of the top bunk mattress.
In this same general vicinity of where we're looking at now, near where the damage B is, we did find a defect or what looks to be a tear or hole in the top fabric material of that same mattress.
In the photo that we're looking at, 22XX, where was the defect that you noticed in the mattress?
It's close to the same area where damage B is, a little bit inset from the mattress, so away from the wall, but where one of the concentrations of blood is located.
Judge, can the witness stand up, please, to identify the area he's discussing?
Yes.
Please stand up and point to it.
It would have been in this upper portion of the mattress, just forward of where damage B is, or just for the purpose where you're viewing it on the television screen, to the left of where damage B is located.
I'm placing 22D on the Elmo. Point to the area so the jury understands of what you're talking about where you noticed a defect in the mattress.
Can you zoom in a little bit, ma'am? The area of defect for this is going to be along where the same area. There's a splitting of kind of the foam in the mattress here, and that's part of where the blood was also. There's a little bit of blood that came through the mattress in that same location.
We're using the term defect, which feels like a more scientific term. In lay terms, what do you mean by the word defect?
A damage to it or a hole that is coming through it, some sort of tear or hole in the fabric.
Could that be seen from the top of the mattress before it's peeled up as we see depicted in this photo?
A little bit, yes. That was where we were initially drawn to the location of the hole or the torn area of the mattress from the top.
So you see this on the top, this torn area, and you decide to peel it up like we see depicted in this photograph, which is 22DDD. After seeing what you see depicted in 22DDD, what did you do next?
Continued to cut through that mattress to try to locate if there was an actual projectile somewhere in the mattress.
I'm placing on the Elmo 22EEE. What are we looking at in 22EEE?
Now we're looking at the same mattress but with the entire top layer peeled back. So now we're looking at the interior spring arrangement of the mattress.
Is what we're looking at what you just described in 22EEE, is this the same mattress, 22DDD, where we see it peeled up to reveal the foam?
Yes, ma'am.
Is it the same mattress that we're looking at in 22X, which is the mattress depicted in this photo to be on the top bunk that has blood pooling as staining?
Yes, ma'am.
After peeling back to see the springs in 22EEE, tell the jury what you noticed.
A projectile was located within this space where the springs were.
I'm placing on the Elmo 22FFF. This is significant. Number one, what are we looking at?
We're looking at a zoomed in picture, kind of a continuation of the previous picture of the spring arrangement.
And I want to draw your and the jury's attention to, it looks like an item that I'm placing my finger to. It's kind of a semicircle portion of an item. What is that item?
That would be a projectile, ma'am. Or a bullet.
Is that consistent with the damage or defect that you saw occurred in the foam that you described before?
It could be, yes, ma'am.
22GGG, I'm placing on the Elmo. What are we looking at?
That would be the actual recovered bullet or projectile, just held in a palm.
The recovered bullet or projectile that we're looking at in this photo, is it the same as the projectile that's depicted and that we just pointed out in 22FFF?
Yes, ma'am.
And the projectile that we just pointed out in 22FFF, is it found in the same area as the defect that you described in the foam depicted in 22DDD?
It's actually a little bit towards the opposite side of the mattress, a little bit further in to the opposite side. It is still the same mattress, but it is not directly beneath where this damage is located, but a little bit further away within the mattress or within the spring space of the mattress.
Can you stand up and show us?
Yes. It would be found kind of towards the top of the screen on that side of the mattress.
So help us understand. Do you believe, based on your training and experience, the location, and for the record, I have 22X on the Elmo where it depicts damage B, that damage B and the projectile found in the mattress depicted in 22GGG are related?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the jury why you feel that way.
It was our belief that what you're seeing at damage B is going to be a deflection point where it is impacting or coming in contact with the side rail of the bed and then deflecting back in the opposite direction into the mattress and embedding itself through the
Objecting at
mattress.
the lack of foundation and proper opinion for
All right,
PSB.
overruled.
You can repeat it because she was talking.
Where it's impacting the railing and then deflecting and coming back or ricocheting, coming back through the mattress and ultimately being located in the mattress through the space where the springs are located.
If I may just have a moment, Judge, I need to set these aside. Behind the top railing of the top bunk bed, at some point we see another trajectory pole that is like a red or pink in color. You recall that?
Yes, ma'am.
One minute. During your investigation, did you have an occasion to follow the trajectory of that damage to the wall and determine what happened at that point of entry?
Yes, ma'am. As I recall, the initial entry into the wall is marked by B1. It clashes a little bit with B, but that was because at the time that we were investigating, we thought that B1 may be a continuation of the damage to B through the frame into B1. However, once the bed was removed from the wall, we realized there is no continuation or no hole on the back side of B. Therefore, B1 was identified as a separate and independent bullet damage to the wall, accounting for a different projectile.
And I'm placing on the Elmo 22FF, we see damage B, but behind that on the wall, we see poking out a yellow evidence marker. Is that what you're discussing, that you thought that damage B and what's behind the evidence marker on the wall, you thought they were related?
Yes, ma'am, we did. The one behind it, though you can't see it, it's going to be the same one that's going to be seen later as damage B1.
Damage B1, did you determine on the other side of that wall where that projectile landed?
Yes, we did. While there's not a punch through the wall with an actual exit hole, we do see a kind of conical shape on the back side of that wall where it looks like something impacted and it just didn't come all the way through the wall. So it struck the wall from the space, the voided space in between the wall, but it didn't actually go all the way through the drywall. It just struck the bathroom side of the wall.
And we're looking at 22QQQ. Damage B2 we see labeled on here. Is that what we would call the defect on the wall that you noticed that was related to damage B1?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Tell the jury about the different heights of damage B1 and damage B2.
Those would also be in a downward trajectory from where we think our entry point is on the bedroom side of the wall to where we see our impact point on the bathroom side of the wall.
I'm placing on the Elmo 22PPP. What's the height of the damage of B2?
Can you back out just a little bit?
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I didn't realize it was still so zoomed in.
So the floor is almost covered, but we're looking at 4 feet and somewhere again in between 9 and 10 inches. So 4 foot 9.5-ish on the bathroom side of the damage.
And damage B1, that would be depicted in 22F. Again, we're only seeing the very edge of the marker behind here, but just for reference, is this the same top portion of the top bunk that we've measured out as 5 feet and 5 inches?
Yes, the very top rail with a little bit of extra would be the 5 foot and 5 inches location.
I'm placing on the Elmo 22CCC. What are we looking at here?
Some poorly done demolition, and then that's going to be a projectile that was recovered from the wall.
After the search warrant was conducted, did you walk around the whole townhome alongside Shannon Bader and help direct her as to what needed to be photographed and what needed to be marked with the different evidence markers.
Yes, I wouldn't say that we're necessarily in lockstep as we're going through, but everything that is marked as evidence is either something that was noted by her or something that was noted by myself. And then together or in tandem, we will assure each other that we are aware of everything that has been marked as evidence.
Putting on the OMO 22FFFF. This was a photo we did not have a chance to view yesterday. Can you orient us to what we're looking at in 22FFFF?
This would be a picture taken from the kitchen, looking at the edge of the kitchen counter. To the left margin of the photograph, you can see a table and chairs. That's the dining room table and chairs. To the right edge, I can point just behind me, but we're seeing the slim edge of what looks like a darker colored or brown door. That would be the front door in an open position.
So the front door is out on the first floor of this townhome that we've discussed.
That's correct. This is the first floor.
Now, throughout your investigation and in your experience as a detective or a scene detective in a homicide investigation, help us understand, are you given parameters on what needs to be swabbed and what doesn't need to be swabbed for DNA purposes?
No, I think that's something that generally evolves as we're going through the investigation. There's no hard, fast rule for what does need to swab or what doesn't need to swab. Generally, we're doing an accumulation of different swabs for target areas, either heavily saturated areas. For instance, if we have what we perceive to be a trail or a series of droplets that start from A all the way to Z, we may take just some of the swabs along that way because we're demonstrating it is a path or it is something we can readily identify as a continuation of droplets. And we may swab at the first point, the last point, and one or two spots in between. So we don't always swab every single spot that we are seeing at a scene, and we don't always swab every single puddle that we see at a scene or pooling area that we see at a scene. But generally we're swabbing or looking for areas that we think are of specific interest for the investigation.
When you decide what needs to be swabbed or what doesn't need to be swabbed, do you take into consideration the information that you were given by the responding deputies when you first arrived at a homicide scene?
Yes, ma'am, that's fair.
In this scene, when you arrived, did you ever become aware that there were any other victims other than the children, Jayla and JJ Bass, in this scene?
For trauma, no, we were not aware of there being any other victims.
Did you have occasion to inspect or look at the firearm when it was found during the execution of the search warrant?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
And the magazine of that firearm that was found during the execution of the search warrant, did you take that information into consideration, how many bullets or projectiles it held when you were looking for things in the children's bedrooms, such as projectiles or casings?
For the totality of the investigation, yes, that was considered. The number of casings that were located in the bedroom, I believe, were found before we ever even found the firearm.
So when you are a scene detective at a homicide scene, we've used words such as projectiles and a word such as casing. What's the difference between a projectile and a casing?
Projectile is kind of synonymous with bullet. It's the actual portion that goes out from the gun and strikes whatever it strikes. Our casing is the back portion of the entire bullet that is expelled from the firearm. In this case, if it's a semi-automatic, it's expelled out of the firearm and lands somewhere off to the side of where the firearm is at the time that the shot is fired.
So we're talking about things being expelled from firearms, and someone who may not have experience could get confused. Where does a projectile expel from a firearm?
When the trigger is pulled and the bullet, the entire casing is ignited, the bullet is going out of the barrel, and then the slide is sliding back, and then your casing is coming out of the side. Generally speaking, most firearms are right side ported, so you're going to have your casing coming out of the right side, and generally speaking, again, most times it comes in a slightly backwards direction. off to the right side. That is in a standard position of holding the firearm. Any variation of rotating the firearm or angling the firearm will cause that casing to come out at a slightly different angle.
How many total casings were found at this crime scene associated with this case?
We recovered 5 stent casings from the bedroom.
How many projectiles were recovered at the scene of this investigation?
We recovered 3 projectiles from the scene.
When you're saying 3 projectiles, does that include things like fragments?
Include what?
Things like fragments.
In this instance, I don't believe we recovered fragments. I think every one of the projectiles we recovered was intact.
During this investigation, you explained to us before that you work closely with the lead investigator and other detectives in the case. Does that include finding out whether or not any of the victims who were transported to the hospital or to the medical examiner's office had projectiles or fragments contained within their bodies?
We would eventually become aware of that. I don't know if we were aware of that at the time that we were working our scene.
How many other projectiles were recovered?
There was 1 other projectile recovered from autopsy,
From whose body?
from Jermaine Bass's body.
May I have just a moment, Judge?
Yes.
I can just have a moment, Judge. I don't have any further questions, but I've made a bit of a mess, so I'm going to try to...
The photos of the
Sure. I don't have any further questions.
All right. Cross.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are you, Detective?
That's fine.
All right, so how long have you been with the Sheriff's Department?
14 years, ma'am.
Alrighty, and a lot of your training for crime scene documentation is on the job, correct?
Correct.
You've done some outside presentations, but mainly you've received quite training during your years documenting scenes.
Correct.
Okay. I wanted to ask you first, you did in fact attend the autopsy, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
You attended it with, I believe, CSI Durham?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, there had been some question, had there not, concerning Jayla Bass's hands being bagged. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And there was a question as to whether her hands had been bagged prior to coming to the medical examiner's office. Do you remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And the medical examiner's office, based on that, contacted you, advised you it had not been done per your agency, and asked you if you wished to have any special processing done on Jayla's hands.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
All right. And you indicated to the medical examiner's office there was no special processing requested and no plans to swab her hands, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And when a witness gets their hands bagged, that's typically done at the scene?
I think if we're talking about bagged hands, we're usually talking about deceased, but yes, I don't know that we bag witnesses.
Did I say witnesses?
If we bag witnesses, we might be pissing people off, but yes, deceased, that's typically done at the scene if we're going to do it, yes.
I apologize, I misspoke and said
okay.
witnesses. So in this case, Jayla Bass's hands were bagged at the scene.
They were not bagged at the scene, no.
Hospital?
I believe at hospital, yes.
Okay, so when she arrives for the autopsy, her hands have been bagged.
Yes, ma'am.
Right. And that bagging is to protect and preserve any evidence that might be on a person's hand, under their fingernails.
Yes, it can, correct.
Now, you don't have any contact with any civilians in this case, Mr. Bass, Mrs. Bass.
That's correct.
Now, casings, since you've talked about firearms and casings, you've indicated typically casings in a normal type firearm, semi-automatic that we're talking about, typically they eject to the right.
Correct.
In this specific case, with the Glock 42 that we have, that's .380 caliber, do you know what side the port is on?
I believe it's on the right side, ma'am.
Okay, and the port's going to be the area in which that casing ejects from.
Yes, it's the opening to allow that casing to eject.
Now, casings are fluid. They can be moved around, they can bounce, they can be kicked around, they could fall in different places, correct?
That's correct, yes.
When we spoke to you, you processed this scene on August 29th into August 30th of 2022, correct?
Yes, August 30th, correct.
Okay. And you had no idea that responding deputies had moved blankets from around the area of Jayla more towards the eastern side in order to retrieve Jayla. You didn't know about that till we told you in deposition.
That's correct, ma'am.
Right. So you didn't know that at all. We advised you, let me know if this sounds accurate, about a year and 2 months later, October 17th of 2023.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
At that point, when you spoke with us and we gave you that information, had you watched any of the body cams of responders?
No, I don't believe I had, ma'am.
Have you to this day, in the time you've had, been able to watch any of the body cams?
Yes, we've reviewed body cameras, ma'am.
Now, since the blankets had been moved by first responders, you cannot give us any opinion as to the actual location of any of the casings that were located on the top bunk, correct?
That's fair, yes.
Now, we did in fact have one casing on the bottom bunk, correct?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
And since deputies had moved the bedding, certainly a casing from the top bunk could have fallen onto the bottom bunk where we saw it.
Yes, it could have.
Without opening either mattress, were any photographs taken of the bottom of either mattress, top or bottom bunk?
No, I don't believe, other than what is already captured just in photographs of the wall. No, there's no kind of holding the camera upside down, just take a photograph of the bottom, or once it was removed, I think all the pictures are from the top and the sides of the mattress.
For both the top and bottom bunk?
Correct. Yes.
Now, we've talked about A, and A is, let's say this, a little more easier to travel or to follow than B was. Is that fair?
Yes, that's fair.
So, and the state's already went over A with you. I'm not going to go back over A. I just want to go back over B a little bit. And bear with me, please, Detective Hobelmann. There's a lot of pictures. All right, so we have states 22 RRR. You probably looked at this photo with Miss Reader. Do you recognize that?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So now we have the yellow evidence marker placed by Shannon Bader. It is labeled damage B, correct?
Correct.
All right. And I think you indicated that you guys had thought something originally, but then you determined that was not correct.
That's fair, yes.
All right. So basically, damage B was, and can we call it like a nick or so? What do you call it?
Just an impact point or impact site, I would say.
Okay. So you originally thought, you and your agency thought, that damage B went through and through the top of the bunk bed into the hole that was behind the bunk bed, which is labeled B1.
That's correct.
And then you thought that that same hole or that same travel went to B2, which was in the bathroom and dug out of the drywall.
I think by the time we established B1 and B2 and rotted it, we realized it's pretty clearly not going to be the same as damage B. So I don't know if we ever got to assuming B2 might be an extension of that.
Okay. So B1 and B2, based on what you're seeing at the scene, you believe are clearly not a continuation of damage B, despite your original thought.
Correct.
You said something, let me see if we can see it in the same photo. I think we can. You said something about damage B having what is blood, that there's some blood around damage B, is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
You just testified to that? All right. Was that area swabbed above damage B?
I don't believe it was.
Was any sort of phenolphthalein testing done to determine that any item you saw of red substance above damage B was in fact blood?
No, I don't. If it wasn't swabbed, then I don't believe there would have been any pheno testing for it.
Okay. So when you're using the term blood, you're kind of assuming.
Presumptive, yes.
And it may very well be blood, right?
Right.
Okay. But you don't know. You can't tell this jury it was blood.
Right, I don't have chemical analysis to say that's blood.
When you were continuing now and you're finding that projectile related to B1 and B2 in the wall, do you recall any debris or blood from that projectile? It would be B2 that was in the wall. Any debris or blood that you remember from that projectile?
No, I don't recall seeing anything on it.
Sticking with B, you gave Ms. Reeder your opinion about that potentially a bullet hitting that B frame right here and going into the mattress where the hole is, correct?
Correct, ma'am.
And over here, that is the area. That's the area in which the projectile, which has been fired, is found somewhere in the mattress.
Yes, in the area of the mattress below damage B.
Okay. Now, can you tell this jury, since you've testified to that, that that's what happened in this case?
Definitively, no, I can't say because I wasn't there to see it with my own eyes. We don't have video of that. That is an inference drawn based on the other damages that we see, and then the fact that we do have a projectile in the mattress.
Okay. So you drew an inference in your, is it fair to say your opinion?
That's fair.
Okay. That something hit damage B and then went into the mattress, but you can't tell the jury that's what happened.
Definitively, no. Correct.
And damage B, can you even definitively tell this jury that damage B occurred from this case?
I don't, based off of what we see with the blood, well, with what you're going to say is going to be the presumed blood, yes, it would be our thought that this is going to be from this case. But definitively, no, I can't say that I absolutely have knowledge of the condition of this frame before this ever occurred. That is a conclusion that is drawn from our investigation.
And it may very well be, just as I talked about the blood, but you're not telling this jury you can definitively say damage B occurred that night, it was shot that night.
Yeah, I don't have any foreknowledge of the, or pre-existing knowledge of what the condition of the framework looked like.
Now, when the mattress had been opened up, and Ms. Reeder was showing you photographs of the mattress, we could see the coils, correct?
Correct,
All right.
strings coils, yes.
And that's where you and your agency located a fired projectile.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, when Ms. Reeder was showing you that photograph, and you know which one I'm talking about, right?
Yes.
Or I'll have to sift through all the photos.
Yeah.
It was the opposite side that we should have been looking at. Is that correct?
The location of where the projectile is that you're asking?
Yeah.
Yes, if you're looking at the mattress as it would have been on the top bunk, it would have been nearer the front side of the frame, the open side, opposite to the wall side. So the defect or the damage that we believe is the entry point of that projectile is nearer to the frame where we saw B. The projectile is actually recovered nearer or on the opposite side of the mattress, away from the wall.
So it's kind of turned.
Yes, that was part of our conclusion of having impact. If it had impacted B and deflected or come ricocheting back, it's now coming in a direction back towards the direction it came from, and that's why it's located further onto the side of the mattress away from the wall.
Okay, so when I'm looking at that mattress, and it's on the bottom bunk at the time that you guys are examining it and take the photos, correct?
Yes, it's photographed on the bottom bunk.
But that is actually the mattress from the
From
top
the top
bunk?
bunk, correct.
All right. So when I'm looking at that, and in the lower right-hand corner where we could see it pulled back, where would that specific area have been in terms of the frame and the wall?
That area that is peeled back from the frame of the wall is right there where damage B is, and below the green marker that's on the wall. That saturated area that we see in that corner of the mattress.
Okay, thank you, that clarifies that for me. So basically what we've done is we've moved the mattress from the top to the bottom, and then we have pulled it back to get the projectile out of there.
Correct.
Okay. Now, we also told you something else at deposition you were not aware of. Do you remember that?
I'm sure you're about to tell me.
If you don't worry. Didn't in fact we tell you at deposition?
Your Honor, this is hearsay.
Earled.
Didn't we in fact advise you at deposition on October 17th of 23, which is about a year and 2 months later, that CSI Bader had actually documented that the projectile came from the bottom mattress?
Yes, I believe that was mentioned at the meeting with us.
And she had indicated that in reports. It's even on property receipts where evidence is listed, correct?
I did specifically see it on property, yes.
Okay, thank you. My question then, Detective Hobelmann, did you discuss that with her after our deposition where we pointed that out to you? Did you kind of discuss it with her and let her know she made an error?
I'm sure I did. I don't recall specifically the conversation, but yes.
Sure. And that's something you should do,
Yes.
all right? Now, we talked a little bit about potentially the red substance above B and B itself. You can't tell this jury that's specifically from this event. How about A? A could be from this event, but you cannot specifically tell this jury it definitely was. And I'm speaking of A, A1, A2, and A3.
That's fair, yes.
Right. And again, it very well could be, and
Right.
you've done the rotting, but you cannot definitively say it is related.
Right, that's fair.
Were the mattresses kept?
No, I do not believe either mattress was retained.
Okay. Do you know why? I know you have a big property department.
No, just the photographs and documentation of it at the scene. I think we felt was complete at that point.
You also told us, you gave an opinion about where the gun was, that the gun would be facing towards A. You can't say that's where the gun was facing, correct?
I can only say that with projectile damage, that at some point the muzzle of the gun has to be pointed in that direction for the projectile to take that path.
The gun could be on the top bunk, it could be off the bunk, just pointed in that direction.
Anywhere along that same line of where the rod, if you extrapolate it out the same angle that that rod is at, anywhere along that pathway, the gun could be pointed or held.
Okay, that makes more sense, anywhere along that pathway. And guns move, people move, will you agree with that?
That's fair, yes.
And I know you had some involvement with additional items in the kids' room, and I would like to find those photos, if you could bear with me, Detective Hobelmann. Detective Hobelmann, 22P states exhibit. Do you recognize this?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. And this appears to be, and Ms. Bader talked about it yesterday as well, this appears to be some sort of baby bassinet with an evidence marker 7, and there's some items contained within it.
Correct.
Okay. What did you determine the black item to be?
So within this little toy wash tub, that item that is the black item appears to be an in-pocket holster.
What does that mean?
So in pocket, that settles into the trigger guard of a firearm, of a smaller compact firearm. It doesn't allow when somebody's reaching, the objective is for it, when you reach into the pocket, your finger can't incidentally brush the trigger or set the firearm off in your own pocket. So while it doesn't hold the firearm, it kind of makes the firearm safer or safe to carry within the pocket.
Okay. So is it actually called a clip or a holster? What would you call it?
Yeah, I keep referring to it a holster. It may be closer, you could call it a clip. It's probably closer to a clip than a holster.
Okay. And do we know, does that fit any type of gun, or do you have any way of knowing?
Just based off of measurements, it could be compared to see if it matches a specific gun or not. Sometimes they're made to accommodate a number of different ranges or a couple different makes or models of firearm.
Okay. And did you do anything to determine that clip or that holder, whether it could have been used on the gun recovered in this case?
I did not know him.
Okay. And again, you're just documenting the scene. That may not have been something that you would have been tasked to do.
That's fair.
All right.
Yes.
And that is located somewhere in pretty close proximity to the bunk bed. Is that fair?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, that item's a little unusual there, isn't it? You find it to be a little bit
Potentially, yeah.
unusual.
It's a gun accessory in a children's room, so yes, based on that information, I would say it's a little bit unusual.
Now, you helped execute the search warrant, collected items, documented the scene.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And in fact, there's no full search done of the townhouse until you have that warrant signed.
Correct.
And one of the other areas that you noticed was the children's bedroom closet. Do you remember the closet in the children's bedroom?
Yes, ma'am.
This is Defense Exhibit 1 entered into evidence. Do you recognize that, Detective Hobelmann?
Yes, ma'am.
And what does that picture depict in Defense Exhibit 1?
This is, I believe, is the children's the children's closet.
And what of significance was located in the children's closet?
As I recall, a brownish bag or backpack.
Okay. Can we see it in the photo, maybe?
I think that is the top of it, down at the bottom of the photograph.
And for the record, I'm just
To the
pointing-
right of where the dark pants are. Yeah.
There you go. Okay, to the right of the dark pants, under this brown coat.
Correct.
Thank you, Detective. Was anything else collected out of that closet?
Just some of the materials that were in that bag.
Okay, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more. Let me ask you first. 380 live rounds that could have then been fired in a firearm. Were there any 380 live rounds found anywhere in the home?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Where were they found?
In the children's bedroom.
All right, we have 22 UUU and back to the state's exhibit. Is this the, as you've described it, backpack? Is this the same one that we just talked about in Defense Exhibit 1?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
All right, and tell the jury, and we talked to Shannon about this yesterday, Ms. Bader, but you tell us what in fact you saw, and it is marked by evidence marker, a yellow evidence marker 19. What was in that, Detective?
What we see here, what appears to be a portion of a holster, a box fully loaded or all 50 cartridges of 380 Norma ammunition, and then a spare magazine.
Okay. And that Norma ammunition, I think you already know, but I will go closer. It is 380.
Correct, ma'am.
And how about that magazine? Do we know if it fits in a 380?
I don't recall if it's a 380 magazine or not.
And the other item you said was a holster?
Yes, it does appear to be a holster.
Is that going to be a little bit different than the clip we looked at a little bit ago?
Yes, this one would actually attach to the belt or the pants.
Okay. And do we know if that would fit a 380?
I don't know. I think it was soft-sided, so again, that usually runs a range of different makes or models that it could accommodate.
Okay. Thank you. Now, the bag itself was not collected by your agency, only the items inside, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Do you know why the bag was not collected?
I think what we identified as evidentiary were the materials that were inside the bag. The bag didn't appear to be involved directly, worn by somebody or anything identifiable on the bag that would have assisted with the investigation.
And finding that bag with .380 ammo, a magazine, and a holster, did you also find that odd that it was in the children's closet?
It could be seen as odd, yes. It's not generally a place that we would find those items, yes.
Now, there was blood down on the east end of the bunk bed. We have or the top mattress. We have talked a lot about the west side where the pillow is and where the projectile holes are that we've already discussed, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. And there's blood down on the eastern side. Can you give us any opinion as to who that blood is?
I did not know when we were doing the investigation whose blood that might be.
Okay. And to this day, you would not know whose blood that was, correct?
That's correct.
And any of those areas on the eastern end, and we used the photos yesterday with Miss Bader, are you aware of any swabs taken from the mattress itself on the east end?
No.
Mandalorian Comforter was.
Right,
All right.
yes.
There was also, and again, we looked at the picture yesterday with Miss Bader, there was also some blood on the wall and the blood on the back railing, kind of where you're V-shaping around the east end. I'm not talking about the staircase.
Right.
There was also what appeared to be a red substance. Did you have her swab any of that?
No, I don't believe any of that's swabbed.
Okay. There were some swabbing done, I believe L, M, and N on the ladder, correct, Detective?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. There were some other areas down on the ladder, potentially other transfer stains, also maybe a drip on the stair, on the ladder. Those were not swabbed.
That's correct.
Okay. Did you have any concern whatsoever of contamination by the fact that mattress was moved to the bottom?
At the time that we were moving that mattress, we'd already taken all of our swabs of the areas that we were intending on collecting. So at that point, we were not as worried about contamination. I don't believe any other swabs were taken once that mattress starts getting moved.
Okay. And what happens to the bottom mattress when you're moving the top mattress to the bottom?
I recall the bottom mattress being pushed further in, but I don't know. I think the mattresses would have been in contact with each other at some point.
All right. What do you mean pushed further in?
Because there's a little bit of a void there. I think it was moved a little bit further in to accommodate a little bit of room for the top mattress.
So you're saying that both mattresses were somehow on that bottom bunk while you were testing the top mattress that had been moved there?
No, there's no testing being done. That's just the cutting into the mattress.
Well, that's what I meant. I apologize.
Yes, the very end. It's almost the very last thing we did before leaving the house is remove the mattress from the top bunk, photograph it as we're cutting into it, and then remove the projectile from it.
Okay, as you went through with Miss Reader in detail.
Correct.
All right, but are you saying then that both mattresses were still on the bottom slats when you did that?
That's correct.
Okay. We saw some gauze that appeared to have a red substance or blood at the top of the stairs. Do you know who that belonged to, Detective?
I do not, no.
And the metal clip that you've even described with Miss Bader, why was that found to be of significance?
As I recall, it was mentioned that there might have been a head wrapping or some sort of item on the male juvenile's head. So we weren't sure if that might have been a clip for that head wrap.
Okay. So did you talk to any of the responding deputies about the fact they had wrapped his head?
I talked to responding deputies. I don't recall them saying anything about the head wrap.
But you've described it as something that appears to attach gauze.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Were you responsible for collecting any phones from the scene?
As I recall, we did collect one phone from the couch.
A blue iPhone?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. Do you know who that phone belonged to?
No, ma'am, I do not.
Okay. Now, downstairs by the couch, there appeared to be some substance on the floor. Do you remember that? Let me try to find the photo for you.
probably referring to the area that looks a little bit like footprint.
Absolutely decisive, yeah. I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
I have co-counsel going through the other photos. Again, bear with me, there's a lot of photos. Okay, I actually found it. Thank you, Ms. Fodley. Now this is going to be states 22B, marked by red substance A. Do you recognize that? And is that what we're speaking of?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And that is in close proximity to where the couch is downstairs.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. And are you aware, in fact, that that is the couch that Mr. Bass sat holding his son, JJ?
Yes, I am aware.
22A, is this the couch that we're speaking of?
Yes.
It's marked by evidence marker 1.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's fine.
Evidence marker 1 is actually documenting that clip.
Correct.
So the area, we can see it clearly in this photo that we just looked at in red substance B larger is going to be this area here.
That's correct.
Okay. So you would agree with me that that's in close proximity to the couch?
Yes, ma'am.
Was anything done, what was done with that?
Just photographs with the measurements as seen that we just looked at.
Okay. Was there anything that could have been done, amido black, or anything else to see if it was a footprint, to see if there could be any sort of identification?
I think based on size and what the general appearance of it, at a couple different angles, you can even see where it looks like there might have been toe prints. Based on training experience, it was our thought it is a footprint. In terms of blood collection or processing, I don't believe any was done. I know the floor was textured, so I don't recall. There may have been conversation about there being a difficulty of trying to lift that print with the texture of the floor, but I don't recall there being any processing like amido black done for it.
Now, it's not really surprising for you to see that because you know from the facts of this case that Mr. Bass carried his son down and they were down in that area.
That's correct.
Right, okay. And it did appear to be, like, to you, a smaller footprint.
Smaller, yes.
I need to ask you about Defense Exhibit 2C. Do you recognize that, Detective?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, there is a pink children's car in the lower right-hand corner of that exhibit, and there appears to be some substance on it. Did you direct anybody, specifically Miss Bader or anybody else, to swab that to determine what that might have been?
No, it was not swabbed.
I want to talk to you about Defense 2A and B. Do you recognize this, Detective?
Yes, ma'am. This is going to be the back side of the front door.
That's as far as it goes. Is that all right? Can you see that okay?
Yeah.
It just shows the whole door there. Okay. I have a close-up, Shannon Bader's photos, Defense Exhibit 2B. Is that just going to be a close-up of the photograph we just looked at?
Yes, ma'am.
And that's going to be on the back side of the front door.
Correct.
Okay. What was done in terms of processing of this red substance in these two defense exhibits?
Just photographs were taken.
Was any attempt made, even an attempt made, to potentially lift, say for example, see if there might have been some prints here, or find out whose blood it might be?
No,
if
I
it's
don't.
blood.
Yeah, I don't believe there were. The fingerprint smudges closer to the lock area or the lower portion of the door, I believe did not appear to have any detail to them. But no, there was no additional processing done for the fingerprints or for the print areas.
Gotcha. And no DNA swab, just the print,
Correct.
just the photographs. Okay. Thank you, Detective. Were you involved in searching the master bedroom?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And in terms of the master bedroom, there was not anything recovered ballistics-wise that involved 380s, correct?
That's correct.
Now, what we just looked at in the Defense Exhibit 2A and B on the back of the door, Would you agree with me that that would have been a pretty significant piece of evidence if somebody has their hand in blood or touches it and has blood on them? Could that be a significant piece of evidence?
It could have been. We knew there were multiple people going in and out of the door that had potentially bloody hands.
Right.
Yes.
Did you see in the body cams how the door remains open?
I believe it is open for a period of time for some of the body camera, yes.
Okay. In terms of when I say open, the back of the front door that I just showed you where the staining is would have been up against the wall.
That's correct.
Was any GSR testing done in this case that you're aware of, Detective, on Jayla Bass, on the son, JJ Bass?
No, there was none done.
Okay. Did you request for any of it to be done?
No.
All right. I want to ask you a little bit more, and I'm wrapping up for you, Detective, on the Mandalorian Comforter. I understand there was some additional testing done by Ms. Bader. Were you involved with that?
I was not present, but I was aware of what the additional work was.
Okay. So there was additional testing done to take a swab of one of the red substances on the blanket.
Correct.
Or comforter. And in fact, there were photographs and specific infrared light used to try to lift gunshot residue.
At least see if there was something that would be consistent with that, yes.
And you guys can do that. You have these lights, you put it on, potentially you could see gunshot residue.
You can at least see something that would be consistent with what gunshot residue would be. We can't definitively say that. We would have to send it off for additional testing to be able to say that.
And my next question, was anything sent off on that Mandalorian comforter, what we just talked about, to determine if there was gunshot residue on that Mandalorian comforter?
No, we did not send it to a private lab.
Okay. You didn't do anything with it?
That's correct.
And that potentially could put that comforter in closer relation on the bed to where the shooter is, potentially.
It could, yes.
All right, I want to ask you just a question about, Ms. Reeder talked to you about items that were sent off, and you and I discussed areas that were not swabbed as well. You used the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to send off swabs, say from the firearm, swabs on the wall. There was a swab labeled O that was on the mattress. That is the agency you use, correct?
Yes, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, FDLE. Yes, ma'am.
Now, Florida Department of Law Enforcement does have a limit, correct?
That's correct.
However, they have a limit per submission. Is that not correct?
That's correct.
All right. So technically, in this case, are you privy to how many submissions there were?
I don't know the full number of submissions that there were now.
Quite a few.
Yes.
All right. So a limit, and it's 5 per submission.
Correct.
All right. So you could submit 5 per submission, and technically then you could keep doing that. There's really no limit on what you can send.
Just time, correct.
Just what?
Just time.
Oh, okay. Too much time to do all that?
No, too much time in terms of usually 10 to 12 months until we're getting a turnaround for
I
DNA
got
to
you.
come back. Yeah.
I got you. It would take too long to send that many items.
We would potentially not have some of those items returned to us before trial was done.
Okay. When were the items sent off?
I don't recall the specific date that they're sent off.
Because what is it now, at about 2.5 years since this incident took place, roughly?
Correct, yes.
Okay. All right, but in addition to that submission limit, you can even get exceptions for
On
that,
occasion,
right?
yes,
Right,
yes.
it's just a phone call or an email.
Above us, but yes, yeah.
Right, okay. Your superiors
Correct.
make a phone
Yeah.
call or send an email, so really, there's no limit.
Just based off of what FDLE is willing to say yes or accept, there still has to be a cause or a reason to request additional time.
And a lot of the things in this case concerning the children's bedroom and the bunk bed, that would be pretty significant, wouldn't it?
It could be, yes.
Okay. And if FDLE refused to take additional items, there are other independent labs that can be used?
Correct.
Okay. But in this case, there wasn't any need to go above FDLE because the items that you wanted to send, or Detective Gabot, were sent.
Correct.
No other items besides the ones that got sent.
That's fair, yes.
Okay. May I have a moment, Judge?
Yes.
Just a second. Just a second.
I had asked you about any GSR that was done, or actually not done, on Jayla Bass or Jermaine, the son, JJ, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you aware of any GSR done on the hands of my client, Jermaine Bass?
No, I don't believe there was.
Are you aware of any GSR testing done on Shirley Bass?
No, ma'am, I don't believe there was.
Now, does FDLE do gunshot residue testing?
I don't believe they do in terms of interpretation for identifying GSR.
There are other labs that do that, correct?
Correct, there are private labs, yes.
So technically, if your agency had taken gunshot residue of the son or Jayla or Mrs. Bass or Mr. Bass, it could have been sent off to an outside agency.
Yes, if swabs are done at the scene, yes, it can be sent out.
And as we've established, they were not.
Correct.
Okay. But it certainly could have been done had it been requested in this case.
Yes, ma'am.
I thank you so much, Detective Hobelmann.
Thank you.
Defense counsel showed you a picture of what looked like a handprint on the back of the front door. Do you recall that photo?
Yes, ma'am.
You said that there was no further testing done on it. Did you submit it to anyone else at your agency to look at it any further?
We did submit to our fingerprint analysis unit.
Were you able to get any results from that request for fingerprint analysis of that photo?
No, we were not. It was not a value comparison, meaning they were not able to get sufficient detail from the photograph and or the contents of the photograph to be able to make an identification.
Now, at the beginning, when you first arrived to the scene and throughout your investigation, did you ever become aware or of anyone else being injured in this case besides Jermaine Bass, the little boy, or Jayla Bass, the little girl?
No, ma'am. I was not aware of anybody else being injured.
Defense counsel spoke to you about swabbing and sending things off for DNA. Would the results of any swabs or DNA taken from the top mattress that we've discussed in this case help you resolve whether or not the gun going off was an accident?
I don't believe
I'm
so.
going to object to that speculation, improper opinion.
Sustained.
Would any DNA swabs that were taken from the top mattress discussed by defense counsel at the locations decided by defense counsel, would that have helped you decide whether or not, or who the shooter of the gun was?
Same objection.
Sustained.
I don't have any further questions, Judge.
All right. You can step down, sir. Thank you. Is he released from his subpoena?
Yes.
I would ask he remain under subpoena, but he's free to leave the courthouse.
All right. You're still subject to recall. Thank you. Call your next witness.
Maybe your first briefly, Judge.
Sure.